Am I devastated that my amazing wedding and honeymoon are over? Yes, absolutely. Why is it so dark all of a sudden? Hello? Hopefully, well, this is kind of a mood. NGL. Did I, however, read some amazing books while I was away that I am very, very excited to talk about? Also, yes. And look, I'm not like those booktubers that are like, I was on a 2-week holiday and I read 17 books. Let's talk about them. No. I read 2 books in 2 weeks, like a normal human. And those are the books that I would like to talk about today. 2 books is not that many to talk about, so I will also cover the books that I read in the lead up to the wedding when I was at my parents' house helping to set everything up. Grab yourself an iced coffee or your drink of choice. I myself am drinking an iced coffee and it's very nice. So our honeymoon was my dream vacation because we spent every single day reading by the pool, ordering coffees to our beach chairs, floating around the pool on a little floaty reading, and etc. and etc. And one of the books that I was busy reading away during that time was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Doerr? He is doing a really good job of writing good books. I have previously read Cloud Cuckoo Land. Oh, out of breath getting my books because I've just been sitting on my ass for 2 weeks doing absolutely nothing except reading and ordering food to my beach chair, okay? So I had previously read Cloud Cuckoo Land by him. One moment to admire the book, please. And while I really liked Cloud Cuckoo Land, I loved this book so much. It's a multi-perspective, third-person, omniscient narration of these people who are living through World War II. And the 2 main characters are this little girl named Marie-Laure, I think that's how you pronounce it, who lives in Paris and who's blind. And the other main character is a German boy who lives in Germany, whose name is Vanna, which, funnily enough, is my German grandfather's name. And it follows them as they go through their lives in the lead up to and during and after the war. And oh my god, it is so beautiful. Every evening, I would say to my husband, I would say to him, I can't wait to read my book tomorrow. And so it basically just follows them and their stories. There's also a through line of this magical stone or diamond or something that has this long history, and it's said that whoever owns the stone will live forever, but those around them will die and suffer. To be honest, I haven't thought much about what the stone is meant to symbolize. I'm sure there's many meanings that could be gathered from it, and if anyone's read this, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that. But I think even if you don't take away a super deep meaning from that, this book is worth reading just for the gorgeous prose and imagery. I think it's the type of book that you can get lost in and just be transported to a different time, a different world, so many different circumstances, albeit very tragic and harrowing circumstances, but the writing literally just makes your mouth water. To show you what I mean, I'm just going to turn to a random page. It was enough when Vanna was a boy, wasn't it? A world of wildflowers blooming up through the shapes of rusty cast-off parts. A world of berries and carrot peels and Frau Elena's fairy tales. Of the sharp smell of tar and trains passing and bees humming in the window boxes. String and spit and wire and a voice on the radio offering a loom on which to spin his dreams. But God is only a white, cold eye, a quarter moon poised above the smoke, blinking, blinking, as the city is gradually pounded to dust. Oh my god, I love it. I love it. There's something so special about big books that you can just disappear into. What also blows my mind about books like this, like historical fiction, is the amount of research that would have to go into writing something like this. I just can't imagine, like, writing this many words and this many pages, 530 pages, is difficult enough, but having to make sure that all the contents of those pages are historically accurate. There was something so simple that made me think of that. It pointed to the specific year and mentioned that snow had piled up in the alleys between houses. And I was just thinking, you would have to check something as small as that to see if it really was a year where there was lots of snow, and if this was the type of city where snow would pile up between the houses. So if like something like that would have to be researched, just imagine all the other historical contents that would need to be checked and double checked to make sure that it was accurate. I think this book is fantastic. 5 stars. I highly recommend it. Obviously, it has some very tragic and upsetting scenes in it because it is talking about war. But if you have read the content warnings and you're happy to go ahead, I think you will not regret it because it is gorgeous. So that's enough about that. The other book that I read on my honeymoon was a very good foil book because All the Light We Cannot See was quite heavy and required a lot of my mental capacity. Whereas the other book I read was flipping page after page, super easy, super light, and super fun, and that was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So this was my first foray into the world of Emily Henry, who seems to be at the top of everybody's reading lists. Where to begin? I did enjoy this book. I think that Emily Henry is a really good writer, like nice, sharp writing. I think there's 2 types of beach reads. The big kind that you've been struggling to get to in your everyday life because you just haven't had time, and that you really need like the space to dive into. And then the kind that are just kind of like mindless, fun, heartwarming, etc. So this one definitely fit the latter of those 2 types of books. So let me just tell you a little bit about the plot of this book. It follows Nora, who is a literary agent living in New York City, and she like is super career driven and doesn't have time for relationships, and she for many years has been very focused on making sure that her little sister, Libby, is all okay. Their mother died when they were young, and ever since then, Nora has felt a very huge sense of responsibility for her younger sister. But at the start of the book, there's like a distance between the two that feels very awful to Nora because Libby is so important to her. And Libby invites Nora on a getaway to this tiny town called Sunshine Falls. I forgot what it's called. Sunshine Falls, I think, is correct. Long story short, Nora is the literary agent for this author who wrote a book set in that town, and it was a big hit. So they go there, and lo and behold, who would be there but the grumpy, grouchy, handsome, gorgeous editor who said he didn't want anything to do with that author who wrote the book set in that town. Why? Because he's from there. Yep. So that is the SparkNotes setup of the book, and it read a lot like a Hallmark movie. Because it's like a parody of Hallmark movies in the sense that Libby has this list of things she wants to do there that are based on those types of movies, like save a small business, date a local, pet a horse or ride a horse, things like that. But at the same time that it is a parody, it also is very much that type of story also. Is that normal? Maybe it is normal. But I was just imagining it being made into a movie, and I feel like Hallmark would have to make it. I'm making fun of it, but I do genuinely think it was quite good. The one issue I had with it was the dialogue and the banter, and also some of the descriptions of the characters were just too much. Like, too witty and too snappy, and I just was crawling out of my skin reading it. Like the number of times that the main characters slit their eyes or arched a brow, etc. I just couldn't help but cringe. And I don't understand how there are so many people reading these books who do not cringe at that. Is there something wrong with me? I just... Also, there were so many funny things. I would be sitting next to Sean reading and I would have to tell him about it. Like a scene where Nora is out to dinner with Libby and Libby's husband and their 2 daughters, and yet the whole time Libby is like on her phone texting this guy. And it was just such a funny image to me that they're like all sitting around at a dinner table and she's just like, oh, but like just sending all this witty dialogue. Oh my god. But aside from that, like, crossing the line of cringe every so often, overall, I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was very well written. Like, the snappy language is really good for the most part. Just sometimes it went too far for my taste. And I liked the storyline with the sisters. It was really cute and touching. I also genuinely choked up at the end. And I don't want to give any spoilers to those who haven't read it, but it was very heartwarming and very cute. And I don't have a heart of stone. I'm a sucker for love. So those are the ones I read on my actual honeymoon. But I was away from home for quite a while because I also spent a bit of time at my parents' house helping to set up for the wedding. We had friends and family staying with us for a week leading up to the wedding, so there was a lot of prep that went into it. That was also just the time of my life, first of all. Second of all, it was an amazing time to read. There are 4 books I read during that time that I wanted to talk a bit about because why not? I'm sitting here, I have my iced coffee, and I'm doing my favorite thing ever, which is talking about books. If you watched my summer recommendations video, you know that one of the books I was hoping to reread this summer was my childhood favorite, The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer, and I'm pleased to report that I did have a chance to read it again. And I'm even more pleased to report that it 100% held up. It was so good. As I mentioned in that video, this book is about the clone of this drug lord. It starts out when he's about 5. He is living in this little house out in the poppy fields, cared for by Celia, who works in the big house. She's very sweet and he sees her as a mother, but she is quick to correct him when he calls her that. And she tells Matt to never leave the house. I don't know how to talk about what I love about this book without giving too much away, but basically it goes through his life from around the age of 5 to the age of 14, and everything he deals with being the clone of this super powerful drug lord. I will say I enjoy the first half of this book a bit better. In fact, I had a very vague recollection of the second half. There's just something so amazing about the storyline of the first half. I've never read anything like it, and it was so heartbreaking and beautiful, and I love the characters, and I love Matt's growth, and it's just so good, so good. And the second half is really good as well, but I think there's just something really special about seeing Matt grow up from being like a little baby into a teenager and everything he goes through during that time. Yeah, it's really special. It's really special. And I'm so happy it held up because... yeah, now I can say with confidence that it's one of my favorite books, even though it is a YA novel. Then the second book I read was also mentioned in my summer recommendations. It is the sequel to House of the Scorpion, which is a duology, and I'd never read it, which was really weird because when I opened the first page of The Lord of Opium, it starts exactly where the first book ends.
Wow.
This one follows Matt as the new Lord of Opium, even though he's only 14 years old. And he is on a mission to save these people who have been microchipped to be mindless laborers in this horrible place. There's again lots of very lovable characters in this book. There's also a love story in House of the Scorpion that I think is so sweet. And I feel like it doesn't feel the same in this book. I think they are really good books and they're really good to read during the summertime. So the third book that I read during this lead up to my wedding was The Dispossessed by Ursula K Le Guin. Came highly recommended, and I can totally see why. I'm so happy to finally have read an Ursula K Le Guin book. She is a science fiction icon, and I am blown away by her writing and her world building. This book follows Shevik, who is a scientist? I can't remember his exact role. Oh, he's a physicist, I think. Yeah, anyway, and it plays out across two worlds. There's one storyline where Shevik is on the planet of Urus, the sister planet of Anaris, his home planet. And it's a very interesting dynamic because his home planet is made up of people who left this mother planet to start their own society of anarchists. And they don't have government, they don't have police, they don't have anything that we have in our society that we see as normal because it's an anarchist society. And it works so well. Whereas the planet that he travels to tell them about this society is very hierarchical and I guess more like what we're used to with lots of power dynamics and poverty and suffering. And back home they suffer as well, but it's all about sharing with each other and using what's available and working together on things. So it's really interesting to read about, and I'm just so impressed by the effortlessness with which Ursula K Le Guin writes about things that are so complicated. Like, it's like she just has these whole worlds and all this detail in her head, and then she just shows us a little fragment of it. And it's amazing. So I am so impressed by her and genuinely think she's amazing, and I do want to read more of her stuff. But The Dispossessed was a little too sci-fi for me, I think. I think that's my problem with it, because even though I thought the writing was amazing and just like so straightforward but still like gorgeous, and the world building was amazing and the attention to detail and everything was great, there was something about it that just stopped me from like loving it so much. And I think it must just be that I'm not that much of a sci-fi person. At times I was like, I don't really care about this anarchist society, and I don't really care about what Shevik is doing on this other planet, and I don't care about this story. So I don't really know what it is about it that made me feel that way, but what I can gather is that it's just maybe just too far removed from what I'm interested in reading about, if that makes sense. But if you are a sci-fi nerd and if you like, you know, compelling worlds built out of one genius's mind, then you might like this book. And if you have any other Ursula K Le Guin books that you think are really good, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I think that she's so cool. Like, I'm just blown away by the fact that she was writing decades ago. I don't know if it was the 60s or the 80s or 70s. or 90s. She also very rightly predicted where we were headed with the world, even though at that time I don't think climate change was that widespread. But she, you know, talked about how Terra, which is our Earth, was burnt to a crisp by its inhabitants. So, yeah. Saving the worst for last, unfortunately. The fourth and final book that I read during this time was Pond by Claire-Louise Bennett. When I told someone that I really love books written by and about women that have very rich detail and not necessarily like a super important plot line, they recommended this book to me. And I can understand why, but it sadly fell flat for me. It basically reads like the diary of this woman who doesn't really do anything. And there's a time and place for that. There are definitely books like that I really enjoy. I just didn't care about her. It's very short. It was a 4-hour audiobook, and I basically listened to it while I was cleaning all day in preparation for guests. You know how I was just saying I love a long, thick book because you spend so much time with the characters? Maybe the fact that it was only 4 hours long meant that I was not able to really get into the mind of this character. What's funny is I read another book recommended by the same person that was kind of similar, but at the same time it was so much more compelling because the character was so much stranger and there was a mystery behind it that made me want to keep listening because I wanted to see what was really going on. And that didn't exist with this one. So I don't know if the fact that I was cleaning and just like going about my day while I was listening meant that I wasn't able to appreciate some much deeper insight or meaning in the book. That is very likely the case because I think it's quite well rated. I mean, the fact that it was recommended by someone in the publishing industry. Maybe once I finish my publishing degree, I'll be like, oh, this is the greatest book ever written. But I think I gave it like a 1.5 or 2 stars. So that's where I'm at with that. And if you're a huge fan of it, please prove me wrong. I would love to hear your thoughts. So that, my friends, is all the books that I read, both on my honeymoon and the time that I was away preparing for my wedding. And yeah, it was very, very nice. Very nice. I had the time of my life, read so many good books, married my high school sweetheart, got to see old friends, and just have the greatest time of my entire life. So I hope you enjoyed this little casual catch-up. BookTube is the #1 thing that I was super excited to come back for, so I hope that you too are happy that I'm back. And I have many fun videos coming up that you can get excited for. And I hope in the meantime you are enjoying the last days of summer. I feel like summer is going to go on quite a bit longer. Based on last year, summer ended like end of September. So I'm seeing like fall videos coming out and I'm like, I don't think we're ready for this yet. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and for sticking around to the end. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!